Welcome everyone to MedTech Trends. I'm your host, Dorian Muraru. Today I have with me Carie Dolha. Carie, did I pronounce your last name correctly?
You did. Well
Awesome.
done.
I'm glad. So Carie is a British Columbia native. So she grew up there with her family who, and I quote, pushed good healthcare and physical exercise. She used to hike through the BC mountains as a child, and that sense of adventure led to her traveling all around the world and learning about various cultures and traditions. And while traveling, she learned that healthcare varies from place to place. And today she spends a lot of her time researching traditional medicines to fulfill her passion of healing with nature. So welcome, Carie.
Thank you for having me. That sounded wonderful.
I'm glad. So today I wanted to talk to you about a couple different things. But one of those things is how through the experiences that you've had with going through an illness and kind of making a recovery, and along that journey you were using medical cannabis, and maybe that was the first time you were using it for that purpose specifically, but that ended up making a big difference in your health and in your life. And so we'll get to that. The first thing I wanted to bring up is something really cool that you mentioned, which is that you like to spend a lot of your time with your grandson. And so you'll go out and kind of do some hiking in the forest, and you'll pay attention to the plants, different types of like trees and the different types of fungi. How old is your grandson?
My grandson is 6. He is also a little bit autistic. So it's something that we get to do together that helps with our energy. We both have an excessive amount of energy. And we both get to walk out and enjoy each other's company while we get fresh air, and we're learning about what's natural and how the environment works.
That's awesome. Does he ask a lot of questions?
Actually, he tells me a lot of what he knows. And he educates me on everything.
All right, smart kid.
Yeah. So he's quite, but no, he's really interested in how the life cycle of plants and the environment works and how it heals our bodies. I mean, he can tell you a whole bunch of stuff, and he does often actually teach me as well. But it's an opportunity to go home and learn and find the information from the professionals as well. So it's pretty neat experience.
Mm-hmm. That probably comes from growing up, but not being in a big city all the time, right? I think if you're surrounded by a lot of nature and you got mountains and oceans and lakes and everything right around you, then you do a lot more of that than you would, let's say, I don't know, playing video games or something like that.
Yeah, I think it's a natural part to go back to. Growing up with my grandparents and my family being huge outdoor enthusiasts. My grandfather hiked glacier upon glacier. My father also did that as well. He actually even passed away in an avalanche from backcountry skiing. So it is really in my blood to be out there in the outdoors. For a while as a teenager, that was the start of my travels, was to escape through that, and who needs the farm and who needs the mountains, and I'll be a city girl and what have you. But really, you're drawn back to it at the end of the day, and that's where I've returned.
Awesome. I love it. I love being outdoors too. I'm a huge outdoors person. Love going camping, love seeing the outdoors. It's really therapeutic, I find. Very therapeutic.
Yeah, and such a difference in the air quality as well, I'm noticing. So I'm really grateful to be
totally.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You mentioned also that that you do quite a bit of research into like natural health and natural medicines. What are some of the things that you've learned in your research?
Well, my journey did actually start with this research when I became sick. I was very ill, and I returned to learning about my food first, plant grown, and then I started using cannabis for that reason as well. So that started my research, and away it went. And now I'm studying traditional medicines. That like from different elders. We have Walter LaValle and Betty, I want to make sure I say her name right, McKean, some elders, and they teach about the different plant medicines. Muscade tea, they call it the plant of life. We have David Wolf, who wrote a book actually on chaga medicine. It's quite a popular mushroom now. Then we have Paul Stamets. He's, renowned for his medical research, his research on mushrooms and the fungi and how that operates in our forests. And then in turn, the medicine and the benefits that come from that as well. So those little bit of some of my research so far.
Jeez. Okay, so it sounds like something that you could probably talk for hours and for days on
Yeah.
the topic. That's so cool. That's so interesting. I always thought it'd be an awesome thing to be able to go live with some First Nations
Mm,
communities and just see, what did they do, 1,000 years ago, or even 500, even a couple of years ago, well, not a couple,
that's right.
but like about 200 years ago or earlier than that. How was it that they came across? Well, first of all, how do they figure out what was wrong with somebody that was sick, and how do they, know that one person was sick in a different way than another person, and how in the world did they figure that plants could be used to cure things? That's an incredible thing. It's like thousands of years of experience.
That's right. I think it is thousands of years of experience. I've gone some of my research and the book on it's amazing how much information the traditional medicines have from First Nations peoples in our culture. The northern hemisphere that we live in is phenomenal. The plants, I can't remember how many different plants they use in species in our boreal forest. Quite a few, but they know all the illnesses. I mean, they know how to, if you've got thin blood, they know how to use a certain plant to use it for coagulation, female reproductive issues, asthma, everything you could think of, they know it. It's fascinating, and it's something that I think that we need to honor and learn, and it's part of my family heritage as well, so I'd like to learn it to honor that as well.
That's such an interesting topic. It's a huge topic. I mean, we can talk about that for days and days. It's extremely fascinating, that, and then also the fact that it's somehow that isn't as mainstream as you think. I mean, it's become quite popular, I think, in the last couple of decades. I would say naturopathic medicine and I think there are a couple of names in a couple of different disciplines within that, but essentially like non-traditional, where traditional is usually thought of as, medicines like drugs.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's a huge, and it's coming back to us, and I think that's a little bit ironic. It was there
Yeah.
for thousands of years. We kind of forgot it because of these traditional drugs and medicines in Western medicine that we have now, and now we're rediscovering those things.
I think we're swinging back, and I think sometimes we swing in the pendulum. It swings way over to one side, and I think that's what we've done. And now it's coming back into the middle and kind of meeting things where they're at. The technology that we have is phenomenal, and the ability that we have, we never had before. But if we could meet them in the middle, with our history and natural medicines and natural environments, what a blessing we would have.
Hmm.
Sorry,
Yeah.
I just want to fix my light here quickly.
Yeah. Not a problem. I think, yeah, the lighting is a little bit tricky there sometimes.
Yeah. Sorry.
Go ahead, take your time.
Okay.
Okay, perfect. Back on track. Okay, cool. So, okay, so Carie, one of the things that you mentioned when we first had a chance to get to know each other. So about 3 years ago, you were diagnosed with something, and after having, obviously you were noticing some symptoms, and you went in to see a physician, and you got diagnosed with, I believe, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, adenomyosis. Can you
Very, very close. Yes, it's odenomyosis.
Okay.
Tricky little name, yeah.
So can you tell me a little bit about how that happened?
Yeah, it's a lot of women as we age, our reproductive organs, for whatever reasons, age has a lot to do with it. But we get medical issues. So lots of women are familiar with endometriosis. And cysts, fibroids, as well as the one that I just learned about that I had was adenomyosis. So that apparently, from my understanding, is sort of endometriosis of your uterus. The problem that I was having was irregular bleeding, nonstop bleeding, which resulted in me having very low hemoglobin levels, low oxygen blood levels because my iron was depleted to practically nothing. By the time I had gone home, I was about 10 points off of a blood transfusion. I wasn't aware of that. My thinking was very foggy because of how ill I was. I was bruising insanely. Nausea, swelling and inflammation of that area, including my back and down my legs. It was quite painful to go through. So those were some of the physical symptoms that I suffered at that time.
Mm-hmm. This didn't happen overnight though, right? It was over a period of time?
It was, and I think that's part of my discussion is that I learned to ignore my body for so long, putting other people first, growing up from a farm and being a tough girl, various reasons that I didn't take care of my health and acknowledge what was going on. I just kept pushing it off until it got to that sort of I had to do something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we'll definitely come back to that point because it's one of the biggest learnings that I've had from speaking with you before. But I want to ask you, so you had these experiences and you were going to see the physician, and at some point in there, actually, you know what, maybe I'll kind of backtrack a little bit because I did read up on this a little bit, and what I found was that there are some treatment options. So this is from
Yes.
like webmd.com. Obviously, people have different experiences actually because it's a case by case basis. But I found it interesting to know that there are some treatment options. For example, like hormone therapy is one of them. Anti-inflammatory medications is another one. But really, the only quote unquote cure for it is to get a hysterectomy, which is a pretty drastic thing.
Yes. Yeah.
Is that? Go ahead.
Sorry, it is quite drastic. They do have different things that they can, if they can catch it in time, to work for. Sorry. Can you repeat the question? I totally.
Yeah. So no worries, no worries. That's so what I'm curious about is, so there are just a couple of like kind of treatment options, and then at that point, really the only thing that you can do, the ultimate sort of like cure for it, if you want to call it that, is to get the hysterectomy. But that's
That's correct.
Yeah, it's a huge jump from just some medications to, if those aren't working, then you get a hysterectomy. There's nothing really in between there.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, that's correct.
Is that what happened?
That is exactly what happened, and I ended up needing a hysterectomy. So at the end of May this year will be my 1 year from having the hysterectomy. Yeah, and it helped me enormously. It's too bad that there wasn't something ahead of time that maybe, but anyways, for now, that's what happened. And that was my story. And actually my two sisters also had hysterectomies this year. My one sister had to go to Vancouver for it. It was a very serious procedure that she had to go through. So yeah, we were trying to learn about that as well. And I'm trying to learn about the plant medicines that I can maybe help other women with that are struggling with these issues.
Mm-hmm.
But for now, when it started and when I was going through all of that, cannabis was what helped me. The nausea was profound. And so eating became something that I had a hard time doing. And holding the food down. So I used cannabis for that. The pain as well. The inflammation that was happening in my body was pretty phenomenal. So I think that it really helped with that as well.
Did you start using the cannabis, like how early on in you finding out about the diagnosis did you start using cannabis?
Actually, I was using it probably that year. Within that year, I was using it. So as soon as I started getting the symptoms like that, I started trying to find ways that I wasn't taking pharmaceutical, medical stuff, instead looking towards my diet and looking towards my natural medicines.
Mm-hmm.
But after the year, probably about a year, and then I got diagnosed. So it's been almost another year that I've been practicing using it as well.
Okay. Okay.
Mhm.
And so I'm curious then, how did you come across the medical cannabis or medicinal cannabis? Because it very similar to what you were saying, it's not, there aren't that many options. Even if I go on a WebMD, it's not like they start talking about, well, I think it's actually, it might be a US based website. So that might be why, but it's not the first thing that comes to mind when you go see your physician to say, you know, if you've got these symptoms, yes, that we have these medicines, but at the same time, you might consider using cannabis products because that could help with any number of things. How did you find out about this option?
To be honest, to begin with, it was my peers. Another issue I was having at the time was insomnia. So that's actually how it started. I forgot that that was one of my initial huge symptoms. So struggling with insomnia, they had suggested trying it. And that's honestly what started me. So I tried it. It did help. So I thought maybe there's something to this. Fortunately, we are able with technology again to have more information. So I started researching. I found a resource center that hooked me up with the information about cannabis, what it is that they do, and what doctors that they could get me in touch with that I could go to and learn from and get my medical certificate for that.
Okay, so you did end up having, okay, so it started off as conversations with some friends, some colleagues, and then that's how you first became sort of familiar with using cannabis for medicinal purposes. And then at that point, you went to see a physician, and did you let that conversation continue from there?
That's right. So I went to a physician and I spoke to him about my issues and what was going on. And he had some of my information as well, my health information. So we discussed it and he signed off on it. And he signs also how much you're using, the prescription dosage as well. And then you're also hooked up with the different medical companies from the government that supply the cannabis and whatever products you need to help you with that.
Hmm. I'm
Mm-hmm.
really curious about this because how, so like this is still a relatively new thing. Actually, it is. It's
Yeah,
a
it's brand new.
new thing, like
Mm-hmm.
specifically with the purpose of treating symptoms for illness. Um, like, did you find, was the physician like well informed? Did they, were they able to tell you like what, you know, what products might work for you?
Well, through the resource center, they had doctors that are specifically educated and have the proper information on cannabis, and they are supporters of cannabis. It was hard to track the doctor down, but they supplied him for me after I had, because I found him too. With all my research. But no, that specifically, the doctor that I spoke to was for cannabis, had spoken about some of the research that was done on cannabis. Also spoke to me about the misconceptions of cannabis and what we could be dealing with there, what I maybe was struggling with there as well. So it was quite informative, actually.
Hmm. What kind of misconceptions did he bring up? I'm curious.
That it's just for stoners back in the, the hippies. I had my own misconceptions. I still do, that pot smokers are lazy, that, what else? I don't know, that they're not too intelligent, very judgmental, but very strong perceptions to kind of overlook so that your mind is opened up to what is possible and what the possibilities of cannabis are.
I totally agree with you. It's the stigma around it that I think a lot of people are going to take a long time to get around.
Yeah.
Which, and I have to ask, like when I look at this issue, I think where did this come from, right? The plant has been around for thousands of years. It's been used for thousands of years.
It also has cannabinoid systems in the plant that actually can only operate in our systems by reaching that same system that's been developed in our bodies.
Right.
So for me, from an evolution standpoint, I think that's pretty fantastic that we've grown along with these plants and that they're actually meant for us.
Mm-hmm. I love how well informed you are. I could tell that you've done your homework on this.
I love it. It's a
This
passion.
I love it. This is one of the things that I also wanted to bring up. Is just that you have this this energy, this passion now for looking after yourself and looking after your health, and like really taking ownership over your healthcare, which is one of the points that I wanted to bring up again. We'll come back to that
Wonderful.
as well.
Okay.
But okay, awesome. So you're right. I mean, it's still a taboo topic. For some reason, it's still associated with stoners and potheads and like people that use it purely recreationally. And it has all it does is it slows you down and puts you in a certain category of people. But in reality, it has a lot of medical purposes and a lot of medical benefits, and a lot of people actually benefit from it. And I'm just glad that it's an option for people such as yourself and for many others that can really benefit from it. So it's just great that we're all finally like on this page.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that. I'm just going to read a short kind of quote here from the discussion that we had before. So you mentioned that that you're thrilled and proud of how you've been able to handle your the growth in your health. Especially with all the issues in the healthcare system and with the misunderstanding of the natural plant grown medicine. So I'm wondering, like, what did you mean by these? And let's start with the first one, the one about the healthcare system. Did you find that there's barriers, let's say, to getting certain types of healthcare?
When I'm speaking about healthcare, I think that maybe what I'm sharing is, and this is my perception, is that we've really had one way of having health, I think, as a culture, and that it became very much about pharmaceuticals. It became about pills and chemical made substances that have an enormous amount of side effects negatively. So I also think that there weren't enough different perspectives on healing and health. I think with healthcare as well, it's about trying to heal the sickness once it's there already, rather than also be beforehand. I can't remember the term for that, but yeah, to be thank you. Yeah, preventative in that. And I think that's where the differentiation in perspectives I appreciate. So learning about traditional medicines and your food and all of that, it's more about health rather than fixing an illness.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Great perspective, absolutely. And there's another word that that gets used quite a bit, and I think maybe people have slightly different meanings for it or different ways of defining it. But this idea of holistic medicine, which is I guess roughly the idea that if you take a look at the body as it's a complex system, it has a lot of different needs, and it incorporates both the preventive side of it. So we're looking at things like our lifestyle factors and dietary things and exercising and even the mental health component of it as well. But also, I think the other sort of dimension of this holistic health is this idea that even once you get sick, because I think inevitably most people end up getting sick, and even if most of those things are preventable, at some point in your lifetime, you're probably going to get sick with something. So once you do, then I guess the idea behind holistic medicine is you treat that not as a completely isolated thing, but there are many different factors that can contribute to it, and because of that, there are many different things and approaches that you can take, almost like a multi sort of factored approach to handling that illness and overcoming it. I would say it's in practice as well, but not everyone has that perspective. There's still this very, very strong pull toward, someone got sick, we give them a drug.
Yeah.
Not always the case for sure. It's a very like big field, and there are many people in it. But I think that is still very much a dominant sort of way of looking at at sickness.
Absolutely. And I think that's with, learning about with cannabis and plants and all of that, there's a synchronicity, and there's also a communication in all aspects of it. And even in the plants, like I'm learning about mushrooms and polypores and, what have you, it all works together. The whole environment works together. And I think that that's something lacking, like you were pointing out there, is that we do have a whole being. We have a physical body, we have a brain, we have energy, and they do all work together and they do all affect each other. And so that was one of my points. I don't just take cannabis. I do a lot of other work and in order to heal, and that's part of it as well. So I think it's just complementary.
Do you think there's a movement toward plant-based medicine and plant-based healing?
Yes. I really do, and thank you to the millennials out there. I think, honestly, who are kind of changing and shaking things up a bit quietly, and that's just my perspective again. But refusing to take part in things, and also, and this is again my opinions only, but they're changing the way the face of things, I think, and helping us look at these things, as well as health. I think everybody's health is crazier than ever. There's more cancer than we've ever heard of. Autism is growing at a crazy rate. And so I think we're all getting pushed back to, okay, this isn't working. What can work? And maybe multiple factors work together. And so, yeah, absolutely. I think that there's a trend going back to that.
That's so interesting. Okay, so where do you see this going, let's say in 5-10 years? Where do you think it might go? Or even 20?
Where do I'm really hoping that we can really incorporate a network maybe together of different traditional medicines, cleaning up some of the pharmaceutical stuff that we can still utilize. And again, there's so much that we do utilize there as well. So maybe I can see everybody starting to work together a little bit more, to fix our brains, to fix our bodies, and all of that.
Yeah, I think you're right.
I hope so.
I think you're right. I think like a hybrid approach makes a lot of sense, and there's a lot of great things that have come out of the research, that the basic science that has allowed us to isolate certain like molecules or certain medicinal products. That's really only been possible because of the pharmaceutical industry. And so
that's right.
There's a lot of great things that come out of it, but at the same time, I think it doesn't make sense to ignore this really like a toolkit and a huge body of knowledge that we've had and that's been growing for like thousands of years, right? There's a lot of that too.
Absolutely. And what a benefit to all of us if we do combine those two hugely educational systems. Yeah.
So lots of room for growth, lots of room for improvement, and something that we're going to work on probably for decades to come, I'm sure.
Oh, absolutely. I hope we do. See where it goes from there.
That'll be interesting, definitely. Okay, so Carie, I wanted to turn back a little bit. So we started off talking about the experiences that you were having starting about like 3 years ago when you got diagnosed with let me just make sure that I'm getting the name correctly. Adenomyosis.
Adenomyosis.
Adenomyosis. There we go.
Yeah.
And around that same time, I think you mentioned that you were also diagnosed with PTSD, where you were having symptoms. That's a crazy combination. Wow.
I never even really thought about that until recently and discussing it with you. And I thought, oh, okay, well, no wonder it was so difficult. Between my iron and oxygen blood levels being low and then being diagnosed with PTSD, which is a brain injury that you have to heal from. It's been a really challenging year. But it's also changed my entire life and my focus. Healing from PTSD is, I just say arm yourself with as much knowledge as possible and get the resources you need. I've been in a lot of counseling. I've done a lot of research. I've been in groups. I continue on with this daily and learning about the brain, how that operates. Neuroplasticity is a little new term I'm starting to look at. The fact that cannabis is a neuron protector, that really got me curious into looking how that was helping me with my PTSD as well.
Hmm. Hmm. And I'm curious because you described some of the symptoms that you were experiencing. You mentioned that these are so like short-term memory. That was a challenge. You'd also wake up with like this sense of an adrenaline rush, and so as these things were happening, like you still had to go on with like your normal day to day. And
Yes.
I was blown away when you mentioned that because I thought to myself, well, first of all, I don't even know how you got through the day because, and if you did, like that's just incredible.
Hmm.
But also, there were people around you, I'm sure, as this was happening. Did anybody notice? Like, could anyone tell, or were you really able to?
I think everybody knew that I was struggling. Everybody knew it. Nobody knew how to help me or what was going on with me. I had no idea what was going on with me. I just knew that I was really struggling a lot and that my anxiety had grown an extreme amount. That's what I thought. And that maybe I had just stressed myself out, exhausted myself out through the years, and I didn't really understand that I had actually occurred a brain injury that I needed to learn about to heal.
Hmm. Hmm.
So quite often going through that as well, like you were saying, I don't know how you got through your day. Well, quite often I felt like I was nuts. So by the end of the day, you go home, you're exhausted, almost have been traumatized from your day, and then feeling nuts, and not understanding what's going on.
Hmm. And I get the sense that you're a really strong person, but also I'm going to use the word stubborn at the same time. Is you so all these things happening and you thought, no,
Well, I've
I'm
been
okay,
called on.
I'm sure. So yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
which,
yeah, for
which
sure.
can be a strength, but at the same time, it's also a situation that you can run into where you're not paying attention to all the signs that are definitely coming your way. Um, yeah, I completely understand that as well. And actually, that's something that I've been trying to tell like my mom in the exact same way because she can be extremely stubborn about it. And I try to tell her just you have to focus on your own health. It's extremely important to do that.
Mm.
This is she doesn't have other things to kind of look after at this point. So it's really a time in her life where it just makes perfect sense. Hey, you know what? Put everything aside, focus on your health. And if you're feeling a certain way, if you're feeling certain symptoms, just figure out what that is and how to handle it.
How's she doing with that?
Well, she's I think she's been getting like a little bit better, but it's just been very kind of slow. I think timing is another thing
Mm.
because, and I think this goes back to your story as well, is like these things are when they're impacting you, it takes up a lot of energy and it takes up a lot of time. And it takes all your focus away from the things that you really want to do or that you need to do. And
Mhm.
so I think she's very slowly kind of getting around it, but I think she needs constant reminders.
Mm, that's awesome. And I think maybe, if I could add to that as a woman, I was used to and taught and raised as well. And this is changing, thank the goodness. But that I was to take care of my children first, and then my spouse, and then my family, and everybody else first. The fact that you're sick or got the flu or something's wrong, that's too bad. Suck it up. You've got people to take care of. And I think, I see my mom struggling, and that's been a huge reason as well that I've looked into this too. They're from older generations as well. That's where they're from in learning that that's what they're supposed to do. And I think learning to take care of yourself in and of itself is the first step. And that's, and I had to learn to say, it's okay for me to do this. Like, it's okay. I can go for a walk. It's okay to put me first. And whatever avenue that is, that's a very different approach from what I had learned. And so I
Absolutely.
try and encourage my mom and stuff as well, or any women that are suffering or maybe have some things that they're curious about, to really decide to make their health a priority, regardless of how they feel and regardless of if they think people think they're silly or not.
Hmm.
Mhm.
No, I completely agree. I've actually been trying to tell my mom that exact same thing for like years now, and
Maybe she can see
it's
this and I'll be like,
I
go mom.
I'll make sure that she takes a look at this for sure. But
Yeah.
but that's the thing, how do you um, how did you change your mind? How was, like, what caused that shift in your mindset from needing to take care and look after everybody else other than yourself, and then, you know, to prioritizing your own health? Because, and there's an analogy here, or let's call it a parallel. You know, when you're on a plane and they tell you that, you know, if something happens, the oxygen masks, they drop, and then
Yeah.
the first thing you got to do is you got to put one on your face, and then you deal with other people second, because if you're gone, you can't help anybody. And that is such a
That seems so logical, isn't it?
exactly. You would think that more people would pay attention to that in their own life and looking after their own health.
Mm-hmm.
Why did you change?
To be honest, I was forced into it because of how sick I became. I couldn't think clear anymore. I was extremely sick. I was in and out of emergency. My life had come to a complete stop, and PTSD. I couldn't think straight. I was being traumatized every day by my own brain. I was forced into it because of the silly determination you mentioned about myself, and stubbornness. And I had to learn that, guess what? If you want to pass away, or if you want to remain this sick for a long time, continue what you're doing or make a change. And so I decided I needed to really change my behavior. And with that, it's just taken off. But it was a decision at that point that, having been that sick after going in and out of doctors and emergency and stuff, that okay, I'm done. I give in. I'm gonna ask for help. I'm gonna humble myself and do the things that I haven't done before.
I'm really glad you came to that realization. And I'm wondering though, you know, because we were talking a little bit about the idea of preventive healthcare before. So to anybody that, I mean, even in your case, ideally, you know, you would have taken care of that. And not to say that you know, the health, or the illness that happened wouldn't have turned out that exact same way, but maybe other
Yeah.
things would have gone better. So is, you know, from a preventive perspective, is there anything that you would recommend other people kind of do early on, as early as possible, to?
I would suggest to, if you're ever feeling ill at all in any fashion or what have you, notice it, write it down. I would honestly write it down, the different things you're struggling with, because for myself, I just kept putting it off. So as the symptoms were increasing, I continued to put it off, not realizing that. And then also I doubted, like, what if nothing is wrong with me? What if this is just me and I'm just too tired out from stress or what have you, and there's really nothing wrong? That freaked me out as well, because then what? What am I going to do? What are the answers then? So I kept on avoiding it. So I would honestly say, please get in touch with your body, do whatever you have to do to figure out how your body feels, what's good for it, what isn't, what foods you put in, what you don't. But really with your symptoms, check those out, take them for real, trust your own body, trust your own self, and do the research, do whatever resources, get a hold of that. Get a hold of people as well that are going to hold you accountable to it. That's made a huge progress. My counseling is part of that. I've had a few different women that are very strong, and they guide me and help me and hold me accountable as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So it, like in your case, there was a big event, and that is what really triggered the change in the mindset. For everybody else, I guess the idea might be to just kind of avoid this huge event to begin with, but to just take
Yeah.
let's call it a proactive approach, and just pay attention to the little signs, and
Yes.
just to prioritize, intentionally prioritize, and ideally to get someone else to hold you accountable, right? I mean, if you're part of a group, if you've got some friends, if you're all kind of going through the same thing, then that'll be a group or at least one person to hold you accountable to that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Share with somebody that you trust, somebody that's not going to embarrass you or dismiss what you're feeling or experiencing. Somebody that's going to encourage you to really trust your own body and your own instincts onto what's going on. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. And since you mentioned the counseling and having a group of people that you can connect with on these things, what I'm curious about is, what do you think had the greatest effect? Was it, you know, using the cannabis, the medical cannabis, or counseling, or was it a combination of the two that really helped you?
I've been in counseling a lot. I was in the social work field for a little while as well, and it did help. But I believe that cannabis, as well as coupling it with the counseling, and then also taking away what I learn each time and practicing it daily in my daily life, that is what's helping me to change my brain and reprogram it and continue on with my health.
Hmm. So they kind of had different purposes, right? As you were going
Yeah.
through trying to get healing, right?
Yeah. So, for example, the counseling I go to, I get to share what's been going on, discussing that, get her perspective on it, because quite often with PTSD as well, our perspectives can be off, and it's from having been traumatized. So, we get a healthier perspective on it as well. We're given tools to learn about our brain, what's going on, what is this brain injury, how do you work with it, what do you need to do. So when I use cannabis, which is a neuron protector as well, and it slows my brain down enough for me to be in the moment, for me to be able to kind of almost witness what my brain is doing, what my body sensations are. So if I'm in that fight or flight, what's going on? And so I'm able to kind of almost slow it down. The cannabis does that part, and then I'm able to redirect it. Okay, this is what's going on. I'm in the fight or flight. First thing I need to do is just get me back to my breath and calm my whole system down. Because if I don't do that, my brain is lodged in fight or flight, and my rational thinking and my logical thinking are shut off. And that's just for preservation of our species, of animals, and that's just, so learning and using the cannabis with my brain, it's been phenomenal in being able to actually start to reprogram my system.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
Mm.
sorry. Go ahead.
It just seems to be occurring so fast as well for me to have been living in that almost torturous existence with PTSD. The change is occurring pretty quickly for me, and I sleep better than I have in probably a couple decades. I am starting to have a sleep routine. I can feel calm and peace and in the moment and whatever, and I wasn't able to before.
Mm-hmm. And how often do you have to use it to, let's say, maintain that level of kind of peace? Um,
Mm.
Ideally, you want to avoid like these huge fluctuations, right? I mean, if you can
Yeah.
prevent episodes having adrenaline rushes happening to begin with, that would be great. But do you take it proactively, or do you take it, as it happens, and then have to wait a couple minutes or an hour, let's say something like that, for it to take effect?
Actually, I never even thought about that, where you're dosaging per if symptom. So that's kind of a neat thing. Primarily in the beginning, I used it all the time because physically I was sick as well.
Mhm.
So nausea and all that stuff, it just really helped everything. Like you said, normalize, sort of, calm down. Um, Now I don't need to use it as often. I primarily just try to use it at nighttime, or if I'm off on my own for a walk or something, I will. So I try to find the different times that I can and will be able to use without um, I don't know, when I'm doing my research. And so actually sometimes with my research as well, I will use it then as well, because it really helps my brain to focus.
Mhm.
And I can actually sit still for an hour when I do. So yeah, okay, so that's what I will do. I do dose it that way if I want to do some studying and stuff, because my brain is very actually still sporadic, and so I have a hard time calming down my system so that I can focus, and that does actually work quite well.
Okay, I'm glad to hear that. That's pretty incredible. Do you see yourself ever like not just going off it completely and not needing to use it anymore?
I do actually. In the beginning, I was a little worried because I thought I can't be like this all the time. I need to, but yeah, I absolutely see it. It slowed down a good amount for in a very short period of time this year. So it already has slowed down a lot, and the results are phenomenal because I'm okay the rest of the time. And so I think it's helping quite quickly. Yeah. To
Hmm.
yeah.
No, that's yeah, that's really good. Because I think so we were talking about like taboos and misconceptions about it. And I think one of them, it's as if all drugs are lumped into one bucket, at least for some people, I think. And then they all think if you take it once and you become addicted or something like that. But even with, like, for example, so cigarettes. I remember growing up and we're taught in schools, you don't smoke at all. And it's that message is so strong that you almost think that if you smoke one cigarette, let's say, then all of a sudden you're addicted for life and you can't stop. Whereas it doesn't happen like that. And cannabis is not only not addictive, but it actually has a beneficial health effect. There are a lot of misconceptions, I think, to get around there.
I would absolutely agree with you, and I know that there's different components that they just started researching in the cannabis itself. THC is the one that everybody is aware of and knows of, and that's because it gets the high, and so that's the one that seems to be focused on the most. And yet there are hundreds of different components of these plants that they're just figuring out. CBD as well. That's the other popular. I can't remember the term from. Chris McMillan would be the one to know for that, right? Bud Tenders Academy. And actually, to be fair, he was extremely knowledgeable, and I will say that as well from the dispensary there and stuff. Extremely knowledgeable in being able to ask me what my symptoms were, what my health issues were, and knowing which plant and what to do, because there's so many different ones. And I think that's the excitement. And I think a lot of scientists and researchers are excited too, because now they have a platform to be able to do the research on this incredible plant.
Exactly. There's still a lot to be discovered and known about the effects that it has. It's just a whole Pandora's box. Like, as soon as it was completely legalized, it's just like, possibilities are endless. And I know that a lot of manufacturers are coming up with different products and different combinations and different strengths and different strains and so on. So I mean, I've
seen it help animals as well, from them taking some. A friend of mine had a pit bull actually who grew too fast, and his hind legs were he couldn't, after each walk, he couldn't jump on the couch. He'd cry. He was in so much pain, and so we went again and Chris let us know about the ones for the pets, and so we tried it on him. And the only way this dog would listen is if I held a spoon out of this cannabis with coconut oil, and then he'd listen, and he loved it. But what a difference in him after he became a puppy again, and he could move around easier. His backside didn't give out anymore. It was amazing to me as well. And so I'm learning, and I encourage everybody else to learn.
I had no idea. I didn't know you could. I mean, I think I've seen a couple of YouTube videos about a dog. I think I remember seeing one that was having like seizures, and they got a syringe, and gave us some, and they calmed down. And the same thing would happen with people as well. So I've seen it work, at least on video, with people that get seizures or animals that get seizures. But yeah, that's actually not something that I thought about too much. But huge applications there.
Absolutely, yeah. No, there's a whole new universe when it comes to this plant, I think, and it's just starting to open. And just to comment really quick about the misconceptions, just to go back to that a little, I think as well, and I do want to say this, and is that not too long ago, when cannabis was illegal, it was also discouraged quite a bit in the public eye, and there was quite a bit of media about it being the devil's drug or what have you. It was considered something awful, and that you would become a drug addict from it and go down that slippery slope, and that it was, I can't remember what they called it, but the one that would get you into all the others. And yeah, so I think our history is actually something that we're battling. Yeah, the gateway drug. Thank you. So I think it's our history a little as well that we're trying to battle those misconceptions. So
I completely agree. It goes back to the idea of changing mindset. As soon as you come, right, if you overcome that, I mean, yeah, it changes everything for sure.
Yeah.
So Carie, if you look back, let's say over the last couple of years, obviously a lot's happened. and you made, from what it sounds like huge, a huge amount of progress and a lot of recovery, and there's a lot of great that's come out of it as well. If you look back over the last couple of years, what have been some of like the key sort of things that have happened that you would want to tell anybody going through a similar experience? What advice would you give somebody going through something similar?
I think the first one for me was to make a decision that my health had to come first, period. That meant my mental health, my emotional health, my physical health, spiritual, all of it combined. I really needed to do an overhaul. And I made a decision that that's what I was going to do. And I did the research, and I continue to do the research. And, you know, there's a lot of people that are very educated. There's a lot of information out there, and all we need to do is look for it. And by the time we get that, then we can utilize it in our daily lives to change it and go from there. So number one, make a decision. Number two, do it. Find the people that are out there for you. And then three, do it.
Yeah, you've got a really strong message about just taking ownership over your own health and going out and getting the information, getting informed. I love that message, and I can't help but think, sort of on the flip side of that, is that it does sort of mean that there's an extra kind of burden on you as an individual, because you have to go out there and you have to get informed and you have to be your own advocate. You got to find your own information and your own resources and so on. It's a lot of extra stuff that I think people have to think about on top of your, you know, your day to day as well.
Absolutely.
But there's a lot of value in that.
I think I had to weigh out like my pain versus my what, you know, what was helping and what wasn't, you know, what did I need to give, and so that was part of it. And as far as the research and looking out, you know, we have our cell phones and we do have the internet with our laptops and stuff. And so for myself, having PTSD and anxiety about going into different institutions for help, I utilized those tools. So number one, yeah, it was just making that decision. And yeah, I am very strong about holding myself accountable and stuff. But Dorian, that's because I wasn't. That's because I didn't do those things, and it wasn't a priority. And so I became that ill. So literally each time I looked at, okay, is this going to get me back there to where I'm that sick, or am I going to move forward with a different decision? And that's where it occurred for me. And I hope somebody can maybe find that within themselves before they have to get that sick. You know, being that stubborn and stuff, it has humbled me, and I'm learning from that too, right? So, yeah.
No, that's great. I'm gonna have to make sure that that my mom takes a look at this, and so she'll appreciate it.
Fantastic. And I encourage her too. Well, it's really tough, eh? Like, because when you are switching that focus onto yourself, it's really uncomfortable in the beginning. It's uncomfortable, it's scary, it's unknown, it's all of that. And so, and then being responsible, like you said, and you know, it's a lot of stress, it's a lot of fear, it's all of that stuff. But again, my flip side was, do I want to continue being this sick or get sicker, or do I want to live a different way? So, and I'm so grateful I've been choosing that.
I can tell. Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, and again, I try to encourage her to just do that because it makes a big difference. But I remember one of the things that she mentioned was that, and maybe this was back to misconceptions, but on a broader scale, it's this old kind of way of thinking that if you start to feel sick, then you go to your physician has all the answers, and that's it. But
that's right.
Today, all the information's at your fingertips. Did you ever find that, you know, if you went to see a physician about getting medical cannabis, getting a prescription, did they ever how was that interaction? Was it like, did you find it was encouraging, or what was your take?
Yeah, it really was encouraging because, and I would say, and this is again just my perspective on it, but doctors that are prescribing cannabis, they have a lot that they're have up against them as well, their own community. I know that there's a lot of pressure from that, that it's not okay to be prescribing this plant. It's been discouraged by other doctors that I went to. So the cannabis doctors themselves are well aware of what the plant is, and I mean, they're learning as it goes, but for now they're learning, and they understand the dosages, they understand what it's for, they understand your illnesses already, and then they are for it. So it's very welcoming atmosphere. And actually, shockingly, it was funny because when they ask you your questions, should I answer this? Like, do you smoke cannabis already? I don't know. So, no, it's very liberal. That's another thing I would say. It's very liberal. It's a lot more than I thought. I was really nervous to go into that setting as well. But yeah, no,
I had no idea. Yeah, you just opened up my eyes. So it sounds like they're like a certain breed of physician.
Yeah, definitely. The doctor that I spoke to, fantastic gentleman, very personable, understands what it is he's teaching and sharing, but also understands as well the misconceptions of it and the difficulty that you can run into for that. And so he did talk about that as well. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good.
Right.
Oh, that's one more thing I can let my mom know about.
It might even be helpful if you were able to find things for her that maybe some of your research or friends that can have information that maybe that are pretty straightforward and easy to read about cannabis, and that might help too. Yeah.
Oh, for sure. Oh, she's open to
not cannabis.
Or just like any condition in general. Well, that's the thing. She goes out of her way to make herself well informed, but I think it's going from, she's got the information, but then it's like, taking the action is the thing that really matters. And that's the part where she can be stubborn and come up with a lot of ways for not taking action.
Absolutely. We all do that. Every single one of us does that, right? And I agree to it. And if so, for myself, because like, I don't like going to doctors. I struggle with that. I don't like going to get my blood taken or anything like that. I'm terrible at it, actually. And I do have to take usually about a day to work myself up to go. And so I'm preparing myself. Okay, what am I afraid of? Why am I hesitant to go? Why am I not doing that? And checking all those reasons out. And then going, okay, what's the reality of that? Is that perspective correct or not? Do I need to take a risk? And then you take that risk, right? At least that's my process.
And then, like Nike, just do it.
Just do it.
Just do it.
We got to take that from Nike, though. Oh, sorry.
That's great. That's what it comes down to, absolutely. So you've been able to change your mindset. You've been able to take action, and you've gotten some great results along the way. So I'm really happy.
Good.
I'm proud of you. I'm sure a lot of other people are. I'm sure your families as well. I'm sure they're happy to see you're able to spend more quality time with them as well.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Healing for everyone. Poor guys, what I put them through. And thank you, Dorian. It's been a pleasure meeting you and talking with you, and what a relatively painless adventure tonight.
Just like I said, just like I promised.
That was neat. Yeah.
So, Carrie, just before we kind of wrap up, is there anything else that you would want to mention to listeners out there?
Other than just, maybe check out Chris McMillan from Bud Tenders Academy. He's teaching all about that right now, and he's somebody that put you and I together. But he's got a great wealth of knowledge about it, and very easy to talk to. He can tell you very simply, which I really appreciated, especially with a defective brain. Just make the decision for your health and that it matters, and find those people.
Awesome. Definitely a shout out to Chris McMillan. He's been on the show before. He's an awesome guy, extremely knowledgeable. His place where you can check him out, it's called Bud Tender Academy. I'm going to see once I post this up if I can put a link and I can try to connect folks. He's a really, really good guy, very knowledgeable to talk to, and I really appreciated his insights when he was on as well. Mm-hmm. And so, Carrie, I want to thank you for coming on today and sharing your experiences. And I hope to see you again. And
yes, definitely.
Absolutely. So we'll definitely make sure to have you back, because I'd love to hear more about your story and how things are evolving and how things are getting better as well.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you so much for being a part of my journey.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for coming on. To our listeners and viewers, we'll see you next time.